Hello, and welcome to my very fashionable choice that I made today of wearing a hoodie and a cardigan on top because the furnace is not working and I couldn't bear to change into something else. Hello and welcome to my March reading wrap-up. I read 8 books this month and I will be talking about only some of them. You know the drill. The first book that I read was Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, and it's a signed copy, so that's exciting. It came from the Shakespeare & Company box. How many videos will I mention this box? Who knows? Is about a young couple, Nadia and Saeed, and you get to watch them meet and fall in love, and all the while their country, which is not named, is on the brink of a civil war. So they start hearing these whispers that there are these doors that pop up randomly and that if you go through one, you'll end up in another country. So they take that chance, and I really enjoyed this book. It kind of explores being an immigrant and a refugee. You get to see how their relationship shifts as they are thrown into these new situations. I liked how he was like breaking down stereotypes that people may have about Muslims. It was a really great read. This is the first book that I've read by Mohsin Hamid, and I look forward to reading others of his books. Also, if you read this book or if you plan on reading this book afterwards, when Mohsin Hamid visited Shakespeare & Company, that discussion he had about the book, they recorded and they put up on their podcast, which I really enjoyed. So if you read it or if you're going to read it, I would recommend listening to that afterwards. I'll link it down below. The next book I read was Perfect Red, The Life of Percival Clark by Jane Lynn. I got this book years ago and I got it for free kind of because I bought another book and this book came with that. And therefore I thought I didn't think I was gonna like it, but I was really fascinated. Explores Percival Clark's life, was an artist and an activist. She was born in 1898 in Russia during the revolution that led to the Soviet Union. She then married a Canadian accountant and moved to Toronto and started a family. And it's just about her life. Really found it fascinating. Also, A.Y. Jackson, who's part of the group of 7, was scared of her, so that's interesting. And the next book that I read was another Canadian read, Look at Me, and it was Hagseed by Margaret Atwood, another signed book. Who am I? So, Hagseed is a modern retelling of The Tempest. It follows Felix, who is his town's artist director for his festival theater. You are Canadian or live in Ontario and you're familiar with Stratford, Ontario, which is another theater town. I think that's what she was like kind of drawing reference to. He gets kicked out as his position because a lot of the shows that he puts on are very like intense and very out there, not like the normal straightforward Shakespeare plays some may put on. He pushes the limits and he gets kicked out by his like kind of work enemy, and he kind of starts a new life. He kind of goes underground, changes his name. Then he finds a new job at a prison where they were looking for like a teacher to teach the inmates a play every year, and one year he teaches them The Tempest and they put it on, and yeah, so The Tempest is happening. They are performing The Tempest while also his story reflects the play The Tempest. I found it really interesting, and I would recommend reading The Tempest before you read this, just so you're familiar of what has happened, or if you've seen it. Either works. And the next book that I read was Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, and I just realized I'm bleeding, so that's cool. And this is the last book from the Shakespeare & Company subscription box. Loot box? Subscription box? What am I supposed to call this? I don't know. And it's a short story collection, and she kind of touches on a lot of different like genres. There's fantasy elements, science fiction elements, comedy, horror. The short story collection kind of explores women and women's bodies and often the trauma that happens to those bodies. And some of the stories are kind of unnerving, are very unnerving, and like after reading the first one I didn't know if this was the book for me because I was like it's a bit too much for me, but I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I stuck through it. There is one short story where she kind of reimagines every episode of Law & Order SVU. I have never watched an episode of Law & Order, but I still found it hilarious and creepy and just weird. It reminded me of something that would be like that would have been published on The Toast. So it's a really interesting read. I really enjoyed it and I would highly recommend it. And the next book that I read is Wreck and Singing of the Titanic, The Ocean's Greatest Disaster by Marshall Everett. This is actually a republished version of the 1912 book that came out by the same name. It's the same book. It's a beautiful copy. I really love how this looks. It includes a lot of interviews and articles and quotes from the people that were on the Titanic or of other people that kind of saw it happen. And because it was published so soon after the Titanic sank, it doesn't go as in depth or as I would like. It's neat to have all those quotes and stuff in the book, but I think I would like a more modern exploration of the Titanic than this. It's neat to have just because it was published in 1912, so soon after the Titanic sank. And the next book that I read is once again Tizella, The Stories Behind Literature's Most Intriguing Dedications by Marlene Wagman Geller. Now I wouldn't say they're necessarily the most intriguing dedications. It mostly touches on really popular literature because some are just like to this person, usually their spouse, but the story behind it can be interesting. I really enjoyed it because each little section that she writes about is like a little story. I found it quite interesting. That being said, some of the stuff that she writes about, she is kind of writing about either rumors of the time of like maybe this is what their relationship was or gossip. So I wasn't taking everything that she was writing about to be 100% fact, but I found it interesting and it's a nice little read. And that is what I read this month. Let me know if you've read any of these books or what you've been reading this month, and hopefully you're warm. I'm mostly warm. My hands are quite cold, but yeah. Fashion.